Make the strings louder.
What's up, guys? It's cold in the shop. It's cold in the shop. So sorry if I wiggle my hands. We're gonna try to keep this short. We're gonna try to keep it simple. And so today we're gonna be talking about 10 things you know before starting your next project car or starting your first project car to begin with. And I guess who better to give you guys some recommendations or some tips other than, I don't know, I'm not gonna call myself the project car king, but I got probably too many. So let's get started. All right, first thing you need to do is set goals. And what do you want out of a project car? Do you want a 240SX? Do you want a drift car? Do you want a drag car? Do you want a rally car? Do you want a circle track car? Do you want a car because you want the car, or do you want the car because the internet hypes up this car and it seems like a lot of people have fun with them? That's a good reason to buy that car, because if a lot of people on the internet are having fun with them, that might be a good reason to get the car. But yeah, so make sure that it is the car that you want and that it makes sense. So, or at least you could kind of justify it. But really think, like, before you go out and buy it, be like, is this the thing that I want to do? Is this really what I want to spend my weekends and nights in the garage doing? So define what you want. Number 2 would be budget and finance. So how are you gonna get it? So are you gonna borrow money from grandma? Do you have cash saved up in the bank? Are you gonna finance it? Is it gonna be like, are you gonna take your 2018 Ford Mustang and throw a Pro Charger in it, or completely gut it and turn it into a drift car where you still got a bank note on it? But yeah, so that's another thing that, you know, you definitely need to think about, is budgeting, not only for the car, but budgeting for future modifications, maintenance. I feel like maintenance is a huge thing. Buying, especially project cars, you're talking about used cars that need work. So if you are buying, let's say, a budget project car that needs some work or needs a motor or something like that, make sure to budget like worst case scenario. And I would say, before you even start the project and you know you want the project, get a range of like the cars that you want in the price range that's kind of like, you know, not the best car in the world, but not the worst car in the world. It's kind of in between. You know, kind of has some give and take with it. But if it needs an engine, I'd say that's a great way to start off a project. All right, number 3 would be assess your skills and the skills of your friends and family in your resources. So do you have a bunch of guys in your group? I'm just kind of using 240s as an example, but do you have a group of friends that's really good at, you know, drifting, or they've worked on a lot of 240SXs, you've worked on 240SXs, you know guys on YouTube that make 240SX videos, so it makes it easy to follow along and get recommendations and inspiration and stuff? Or are you trying to get like you know, a NASCAR V8 and stuff it in your mom's Toyota Camry? You know, like has it been done before? Do you have the resources to you know, and kind of information or knowledge, and I guess willingness to, you know, is that part of the project car thing that you want to do, is actually learn? Because I feel like a project car isn't necessarily even about the car. Sometimes it's about having something to do and giving you something to look forward to, and like seeing progress, and, you know, having a reason to go to car meets and give you something to do on the weekend, and taking it to this race across the country. You know, like it's not necessarily almost even about the car in some instances. So yeah, assessing your resources. All right, number 4 would be access to tools and space. So you want to make sure that either you have the tools, or your friends have the tools, or your dad has the tools, or that within the budget of like the modifications and the car, that you could afford to go out and buy like a tool set or something like that. The other thing is space. Where are you going to work on it? Do you live in an apartment complex? Do you need to rent like a storage unit and work on it, you know, secretly, like in the dark, like at night, where nobody knows that you're working on it in there? You know, those are all things that you got to take into account. You know, if you are planning on doing an engine swap, do you have somebody with a truck, you know, with an engine hoist? Is there engines around you? You know, like does your grandpa know how to tune the carburetor? Or can you ask your grandpa that knows how to tune the carburetor to tune the Honda on your Civic or something like that? I don't know. We're getting into crazy stuff. But, you know, resources definitely help, and I would recommend not necessarily going against the grain if it's your first project car, diving down something and trying to do something nobody's ever done before, because doing something that somebody's done before that's semi-complicated will teach you things, but you'll have help along the way, and that'll help you understand when you get to a more complicated project car down the road. All right, the next would be finding the right car, and I guess looking for it in the right places. So Craigslist is my go-to. eBay, forums, Facebook is now like a new crazy powerhouse in like the cheap project or parts buying thing. I don't know, Facebook's crazy, but I mean, you could search Facebook and it'll pull up all these groups and all kinds of stuff. So there's tons of resources. It almost sucks because there's so many places to look for project cars and vehicles in general, that you almost feel like you're never gonna, you can't get to the bottom of it, and you're always gonna miss out on something. But that's another thing, is kind of goes back into the budgeting. But I would almost recommend like an unfinished project car. Let's say you're buying like like an S2000 or something like that, and you're planning on doing like a turbo build, or a Civic. Let's say Civic. Civic's easier. You want to do a turbo build on a Civic, and you know right away, because it's not your daily driver, that you're planning on building the motor right away. So if you find a Civic that has like a rod knock or something like that, or something that's, let's say, already turboed, that has a rod knock, you're like, okay, cool, I was gonna build a motor anyhow. So you get like this good price on this turbo Civic that, you know, needs the engine built, which isn't that big of a deal because you're planning on building it anyhow. And then you could build it and tune it to like your specifications and kind of bring it back up. The other thing is paint and body work. If you know, if you're willing to deal with you know, replacing a hood, radiator support, and fender and headlight, you know, and having, you know, the body shop down the street repainting like the front end for you, you know, that's also another great way to save money on a project car. You know, hail damaged cars, flood cars, you know, there's always things, but you know, they're give and take. You know, it depends on what you want to do. And if you're planning on gutting it and making it a complete race car, and you're going to get rid of the engine and tranny anyhow, there's no reason to buy an immaculate, you know, perfect running and driving car when you could get like somebody's shell or something like that. So that's definitely some, you know, good insight that I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily think of it at the first place. All right, number 6 is can you resell it? Worst case scenario. So the other thing is I wouldn't necessarily go recommend, I don't know, don't go and finance this project car that you want, or like you go buy an Evo but you want to change the paint color of it so you rattle can it. You know, don't do things like that. Don't go cutting crazy stuff out of it, devaluing it in certain ways. You know, like if let's say you buy a Lamborghini, it makes more sense to wrap the Lamborghini than it does to paint the Lamborghini, because painting a Lamborghini essentially like devalues it because you're taking away from its like original thing. But you know, that all goes back to defining the project car, and if you plan on if that's going to be the only project car you're ever going to have for your entire life. A good example of something like that would be like Toyota Supras. You know, there's this one on eBay recently that it's crazy. It's got this crazy, insane fiberglass body kit and all this molded stuff, and this crazy interior with subwoofers, and everything's painted and custom, and it's just the weirdest looking Supra you could ever see. But there's one dude that probably like absolutely loved that car to death, and that was like his dream, and he built it. But like now he has all this money, probably, you know, $300,000 worth of work or time or effort or whatever into this car, maybe not that much, but then he's essentially like giving it away now for super cheap because nobody even wants it, and it's still like nobody even wants it. So that's just something to think about. Number 7, I would say, is building in stages. So you definitely, I would say, to get the most enjoyment out of your project car is to enjoy it in stages. So instead of having this crazy like perfect like dream build and just instantly like getting the car home, and example 350Z. So you bring this 350Z home and you want this like pro drift car like eventually, and then you just like sell the engine, sell the tranny, sell the suspension off it, and like, you know, order like a quick change rear end for it, and that's it. And then you like run out of money or time or motivation or whatever because you have this crazy project. I definitely say like kind of baby stepping into it. Like if you want that pro drift car or whatever, depends if you're already a pro driver, but if you've never driven before and you just instantly come home and take apart your car, it's not gonna do you any good. It makes more sense to, you know, weld a different throw seat in it, you know, then come back in a couple of weeks or a month or whatever and do steering wheel and some angle mods and take it to the track, you know, but in between, so that way you really get to like enjoy the process of modding that car and not having this super crazy complicated thing that never works and that you never actually get to drive. So I'd say kind of keep it simple at first. You know, it's definitely cool to start out with, you know, tinting the windows, you know, like putting a stereo in it, something like that. Just removing some of these stickers off of the car. It's always a good place to start. So enjoy it in stages. Number 8, I would say, is strategic parts buying. So you want to kind of set the stage for the next modifications without going too crazy. You know, let's go back to that 350Z. You don't want to get like this crazy fuel cell and, you know, this surge tank with like 10 fuel pumps if you're never planning on like doing some over 1,000 horsepower build or something like that. It's okay to just throw like a, you know, quick fuel pump in, like a fuel pressure regulator and stuff like that. You know, so it's like strategically modding within reason. So you don't want to go out and buy this like this is a turbo that'll make like 1,000 horsepower. Like, yeah, I would love to make 2,000 horsepower on a 2J, but like realistically, I would love to enjoy this turbo at like 600 to 800 horsepower. So, you know, just because I have this like pipe dream of a 2,000 horsepower 2J doesn't mean I need to go buy this like turbo that's like the size of the 2J. So yeah, just basically within reason. Number 9, I would say, is figuring out where you're gonna drive it, and that goes back to that whole defining thing. Is you know, if you live in Minnesota or something where or a country where it's just super rainy and wet all the time, and you want to build this 1,000 horsepower Supra, you know, when are you going to be able to drive that and actually get it to work on the street? If you want to build like a crazy pro drift car or something, but like you live in the middle of like Montana or something like that, where there's no drifting, there's no people that drift, there's no tracks to drift, like that just becomes a complicated issue. So I guess, you know, you want to define where what you want out of the car, and then figure out if you're even going to be able to use it there. But the other thing is tracks, you know. So if you want to do road course, is there road course tracks within like less than a day's drive, you know, from you, or a couple hour drive where you could actually go and enjoy it on the weekends, and it doesn't turn into this crazy like cross country trip to like enjoy doing what you do. You know, drag strips, circle tracks, you know, all that stuff. Just things to consider. Like me, if I was going to build a mud truck, there's not a whole lot of like, I'm talking about like the Louisiana, like crazy Mudfest trucks. Like we don't really have any of that stuff here in Colorado. There's been a couple little events that pop up here and there, but they're not consistent. But, you know, it wouldn't make sense for me to build one of those, you know, if I didn't have a place to enjoy it kind of locally. And I would say one of the most important and the best tips or advice or whatever type of ramble video this is a daily driver. So everybody needs a daily driver. Like if your project car is your daily driver and you want to throw like, you know, like a stage 1, you know, like intake tune and some stuff like that, you know, that's kind of different. But if we're talking like a 240 and we're talking motor swaps, we're talking, you know, crazy suspension or track things, or, you know, a roll cage, you know, obviously none of that stuff is fun to have in a daily driver. I tell you what, like heaters and AC and like radios that you can hear, they're nice. Like I dailied like a Turbo Civic for a while. You know, I've dailied like the 1J240SX. I drove that around for a while. You know, great project cars, great fun, really, really drivable on the street, but at the same time, like, it's nice to be able to get on the phone with, you know, with your girlfriend and drive 2 hours, you know, with the AC blast and with the radio and the heater on and, you know, all that stuff. So, and you gotta have something to go get the parts in, you know, you gotta have the parts wagon, and, you know, you definitely don't want to be like staying up until 6 in the morning trying to, you know, like ghetto rigging something on this like project daily of yours just so you can get to work the next day, or however your, you know, whatever your hustle is. But after further review, we need 2 more. Let's see. Be prepared to lose money. That kind of goes back to the money thing, but if you can't just go out and put 50 grand into this project car and expect to get it back. In that case, what you need to do is you need to find somebody else's project car and buy it. Unless you want to build a project car and spend that kind of money. And if you can do it, if you don't like losing money like me, buy a project car that's already been tinkered with. Somebody already put a decent amount of money into it in proper places, but not any money in other places that you could like add a little bit of insight to. That's how you don't lose money on project cars. The other thing, I guess 11, number 12, would be learn how to ask questions. So, and research, because you can't just message me or and say, hey, I want to paint my car. Will you tell me how to paint my car? That's the worst question I could ever get asked, and like I can't even handle that. My head wants to explode like thinking about even trying to like simplify it, and it's like no, like don't like. If you're like, hey, I painted the fender on my car and it fisheyed, I'll be like, okay, well sand it, degrease it, like throw some fisheye stuff in it and do that. But learn how to ask questions. With kind of a lot of the forums and stuff not being as active, well, they're not really active at all, especially now with Facebook and everything. Everybody's pretty much just like on Facebook, and then they ask a question, and then it gets trolled, and then not the right people see it because nobody really cares because it's a Facebook group. Whereas before there was like dedicated, really, really like niche, good, informative people on forums, which there is some really good forums out there, but they're just not as common as it used to be. So it's a little bit different asking questions on the internet now today, but essentially just good questions get good answers. If you're thinking about asking anybody a question, type in that question in Google and go through a couple pages and see if you'll find your answer. And it makes it smooth for everybody. But yeah, that's hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I don't know. I kind of loved this video, kind of hated this video, but I definitely recommend project cars. Project cars keep me sane. They get you out of the house. They give you something to do on the weekends. You don't spend as much money on beer, I guess, or more money on beer. Maybe if you just want to go in your garage and drink a beer and look at your project car with your buddies. They keep you off drugs. They keep you out of trouble. They're project cars. They're that's key. World peace. Project cars.